Hello, hello, hello. So I'm going to do a series about the African National Congress, like the ruling party or the former ruling party of South Africa. They've been in power for like 30 years, so they have had quite a significant impact. So I'll be looking at two things: their successes and their failures. Let's first look at the successes. Number one, the historical background and liberation struggle. So like everything has to start with history. Like, let's begin there. The African National Congress has played a pivotal role in the history of South Africa, particularly in the country's liberation from apartheid and the establishment of a democratic society. Founded in 1912, the ANC began as a movement aimed at securing the rights and freedom of South Africa's black majority in an era when racial discrimination was deeply institutionalized. As Africa's oldest liberation movement, the ANC's journey is marked by resilience, unity, and a commitment to justice that would eventually reshape the political landscape of South Africa. So yeah, it's pretty old, like 1912. Yeah, what is that? Yeah, that's over 100 years old. And to put it into perspective, when the modern South Africa became a country before, like, with the Union of South Africa, so shortly after the Boer Wars, I think like when was it, like 1910 or something, or 1909, I don't know, like they established the Union of South Africa, combining the former Afrikaans republics with the British colonies, creating what's today modern South Africa. And yeah, well, like obviously black grievance was pretty old, and in 1912 they decided to like organize, like that's the modern organization. Obviously there's been like a historical like pushback against colonialism for a very long time, but the African chiefs were defeated. But now you have like the effect of various different African leaders, some of them who studied overseas, some of them who have been educated, university educated locally, getting together saying, okay, what can we do to improve our lot? And remember, this is 1912, so the initial ask, it wasn't too much. Let's see what they asked for. At its inception, the ANC was primarily focused on advocating for the rights of black South Africans who were disenfranchised under British colonial rule. Leaders like Pixie Isakaseme, who played an instrumental role in the ANC's founding, envisioned the movement as a platform to unite various ethnic groups against the common enemy, colonial oppression. While early ANC efforts were largely non-violent and diplomatic, focusing on petitions and appeals to the British government, these strategies faced severe limitations. The ANC quickly realized that real change would require not just negotiation, but a broader mobilization of South Africa to demand equality and justice. Yeah, so the first guys were pretty laid back, and remember, this was before apartheid. Like, with apartheid, the shit really got crazy. So this was like before that, and this was just like against British colonialism. And I know like what history British colonialism has, and in India, the United States, Australia, wherever they like whatever they touched. But the fact of the matter is, in this time, like in South Africa, they were kind of like a bit more hands-off. They were less cruel and less stupid. So like this is what they were fighting against, is like the British colonial system. And yeah, this is like about unity. So here you get, because there's like various tribes. How many tribes are there in South Africa? Like 15 or something. So like these guys are now getting together with like some progressive white elements, Indian elements, to form like, unity, like a united front. So this is like the first time we're talking about unity. In the 1940s, the ANC entered into a transformative period under the leadership of dynamic figures like Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Walter Sisulu. These young leaders, who formed the ANC Youth League, were determined to adopt a more radical stance against the injustices of apartheid. Their influence led to significant changes in the ANC strategy, emphasizing direct action and mass mobilization. One of the most notable initiatives of this period was the 1949 Program of Action, which advocated for strikes, boycotts, and civil disobedience to challenge apartheid laws. This shift reflected the ANC's growing resolve to confront apartheid directly, rather than relying solely on diplomatic measures. So, yeah, you can see we're jumping from 1912 to 1940, and if they were starting out with diplomacy in 1912, just the mere fact that we're jumping to the date of 1940 now, you can see that really the diplomacy hasn't really had effect. If someone brutally occupies your house, they're not going to leave if you ask them nicely. There has to be some action which you should preferably ramp up proportionally. You should proportionally ramp up action. Let's say, the period before you break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, you don't just break straight away. They do something stupid and you resist, you do try to make them change their ways. And if they don't change their ways, you begin being an asshole as well. And until there is a breakup eventually. The ANC Youth League, of which they're talking here, is the Youth League. So it's the younger members of the party, and young people are always more radical, more creative, more energetic, more transformative than old people. I feel so old now. But the Youth League still exists today. But back then, the 1940s, when they had people like Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, this was their golden years, because these guys were kind of non-corrupt, they were competent, they were inspiring, this kind of thing. The 1950s marked a crucial phase in the ANC's liberation efforts, with several landmark events that solidified its role as a champion of freedom and equality. In 1952, the ANC, together with the South African Indian Congress, launched the Defiance Campaign, a large-scale non-violent protest against apartheid laws. The campaign saw thousands of South Africans openly defy discriminatory laws such as pass requirements, which restricted the movement of black South Africans. This bold resistance drew international attention and highlighted the representative nature of apartheid, repressive nature, not representative, the repressive nature of apartheid, making ANC a symbol of hope and resilience for oppressed people worldwide. So, yes, Indians as well, Indians were treated with the same disregard and contempt by the colonial authorities, and they stood up against it. Gandhi actually was, to a certain extent, radicalized, or let's say radicalized is maybe a negative word, became politically conscious in South Africa. When he came here from India, and he noticed how the Indians in South Africa has a crappy deal as well. Let's go on. The ANC's vision for a just and inclusive South Africa was outlined in the Freedom Charter of 1956, a groundbreaking document that called for democracy, human rights, and an end to racial discrimination. The charter was adopted at the Congress of the People in Kliptown and became a cornerstone of the ANC's ideological foundation. Notably, the Freedom Charter declared that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, a radical statement in a country where racial segregation was the law of the land. The Charter provided the moral compass for the ANC and articulated the vision of equality that would later shape South Africa's democratic constitution. So this is something that's still very relevant today, the Freedom Charter of 1955. If you are familiar with South African politics at all, you'll often hear the phrase, the Freedom Charter this, the Freedom Charter that, because this is like, how do you say, it's like the 10 Commandments, or like, you know, the Magna Carta, or what's it like, the Founding Fathers, the first principles that they wrote up. Like, it's not very long. It's not a very long document. It states something. It's very simple, and it states like obvious facts, like, okay, like everyone shall be treated equally. There shall be no discrimination. There shall be no like arbitrary arrests or stopping people, detentions. The land and the wealth should be equally, or should be enjoyed by all of the participants. Everyone born here is like a citizen, something like that. Like in any case, the South African Constitution that we have now, the modern Constitution, was actually based on this. A large part is based on this document. So. However, like certain things, like for example, they say the land clause wasn't fully serviced or done. So they say, okay, the land clause should still be done, and hence the never-changing conversation in South Africa about land. The ANC's journey was fraught with challenge, as the apartheid regime responded to these movements with brutal repression. Following the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, where police opened fire on unarmed protesters, killing 69 people, the government banned the ANC, forcing it to operate underground or in exile. Recognizing the futility of peaceful protests alone, the ANC established an armed wing known as Umkhonto we Sizwe, or MK, in 1961, led by Nelson Mandela and others. MK marked the ANC's shift towards armed struggle, launching sabotage operations against government installations to signal that South Africa would not submit to apartheid without a fight. Although armed resistance was not the ANC's preferred path, it underscored the movement's commitment to liberation by any means necessary. So the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, I believe that was in Johannesburg somewhere. This was a massacre. Those of you who have watched the movie A Long Walk to Freedom with Idris Elba, it's about Mandela. Like the book, Nelson Mandela wrote a book called like A Long Walk to Freedom, and then they made a movie about it called A Long Walk to Freedom, and Idris Elba was Mandela. And I wonder how many actors have played Mandela. Quite a few. Like, was it Morgan Freeman? There's this Simpsons episode where Bart Simpson, where he confuses Morgan Freeman with Nelson Mandela. But in any case, yeah, quite a few actors. Was it Earl Jones? James Earl Jones played Mandela. But in any case, this movie, Long Walk to Freedom, I think is like one of the better ones. Idris Elba was Mandela. And then in this movie, you see like the Sharpeville massacre, and it's quite like, yeah, it's quite like visual. So yeah, it's a good I can't make an AI video about it because it will be too brutal. But you can watch it in the movie. And then they established this Spear of the Nation, or Umkhonto we Sizwe, as the armed wing. So this is like the first time they form a guerrilla movement. And we will learn a bit more about MK later, but MK essentially got some help and training from like the Soviet Union, and a bit from Libya, a bit from Zimbabwe, Algeria, these kinds of places, and like some weaponry from them as well. So they became a guerrilla like organization with bases like around South Africa, like in some of the not all, but like some of the neighboring countries, and they started an armed resistance. Nelson Mandela's arrest in 1962 and subsequent life sentence at the Rivonia trial in 1964 was a significant setback for the ANC. However, Mandela's imprisonment transformed him into an international symbol of resistance against apartheid, galvanizing support for the ANC's cause. During his 27 years in prison, Mandela's spirit and commitment to equality inspired both South Africans and the global community. Meanwhile, ANC leaders in exile, like Oliver Tambo, worked tirelessly to rally international support, drawing attention to the injustices of apartheid and securing assistance from countries worldwide. So yes, like the Rivonia trial was this massive trial, like in Johannesburg, which the state had like quite a few lawyers, like state prosecutors lined up against Mandela, and then former President Mandela, and then Mandela had his own like defense lawyers too. Some of his defense lawyers later, by the way, also became freedom fighters. One of them was like killed. Was it Bram Fischer? They killed him in prison. He fell down the stairs. Like, they basically probably kicked him down the stairs. But like, so even if you were Nelson Mandela's lawyer, it wasn't like, it wasn't a safe occupation. Like, you were still in danger. Make no mistake, the apartheid government, it was like Franco Spain, or, like Pinochet's like Chile, something like that. It is like, you weren't safe. If you caused trouble, like Mandela did, then you're in danger. The only reason they didn't like kill him is they didn't want to make him a martyr. Like, if he was a martyr, then they were scared, like, okay, now the ANC will get more support. Like, we have made a martyr. That's the only reason. It's not because they were good people that they spared his life. And then they sent him to prison for 27 years. He was on Robben Island for a significant period of time, like 15 years or something. And the rest of the time he spent in, Victor Verster prison on the mainland. Robben Island is this prison where he was at, and he was there for 15 years. And it's like a pretty brutal place. It's off the coast of Cape Town in the Atlantic Ocean, so it's pretty cold. I went there once, and it was during summer, and even then the weather was cool. Like, the ocean breeze, like, is cool coming in over the ship going there. And on the island, you kind of need a jumper, to walk around. And yeah, I went to his cell. The cell is tiny. It's like not big. You only got like 5 blankets, like 3 of them or something you used to make a mattress. You used one as a pillow, and then one you dragged over yourself or something like that. It was very unpleasant. And then you had to work in a quarry, and like the quarry had this fine dust, and then that dust would go and settle into your eyes. So apparently Mandela had some like eyesight problem because of the dust that damaged his eyes. The ANC's resilience and ability to adapt to new challenges enabled it to withstand the apartheid government's repression. Through clandestine activities, underground networks, and international alliances, the ANC managed to keep the struggle alive even during its darkest moments. By the 1980s, the ANC had become a major force in the global anti-apartheid movement, with support from numerous countries, international organizations, and individuals committed to the fight for justice. Sanctions, divestment, and boycotts led the ANC allies exerted economic pressure on South African government, weakening the apartheid regime's grip on power. So, yeah, it got the ANC eventually, like, look, the Soviet Union was like starting to collapse and then obviously weaken. So the Europe and the US then figured out, like, okay, we don't need this like brutal apartheid government around any longer. They're just being a general nuisance. Like, let's maybe start talking to the ANC, you know, just like tolerate them and see where it goes. And the ANC did get like a lot of support from other countries, a bit from China, like maybe Vietnam support the ANC. I don't know. Like, I know Libya, Soviet Union, Zimbabwe, Cuba. And then basically the divestment. So unlike, you know, Israel, divestment and sanctions and stuff really worked on South Africa. Like, it weakened the government economically quite a bit. Like, in fact, a lot of business people, like the captains of industry, went to like the president, P.W. Botha, at the time, and they told him, like, look, these sanctions are killing us. You should, like, you know, we're not telling you what to do, but you should negotiate, you know, like, make the economic pain go away for us. Okay, finally, after decades of relentless struggle, South Africa reached a turning point in the early 1990s. In 1990, the apartheid government, led by F.W. de Klerk, lifted the ban on the ANC and released Nelson Mandela from prison, marking the beginning of a transition to democracy. Mandela and the other ANC leaders engaged in negotiations with the government to ensure a peaceful transition, prioritizing national unity over revenge. This commitment to reconciliation helped South Africa avoid a potentially devastating civil war and set the stage for its first democratic elections in 1994. In these historic elections, the ANC emerged as a ruling party, with Mandela as the first black president of South Africa. So, okay, this is like the beginning of my argument. There's the counter argument of the failures of the ANC, but this is the success part still. They're just the historic introduction. The good side, the historical bad side will be looked at later. So you can see from this period, 1912 to 1994, where the democratic transfer begin or is completed, the ANC put up a good fight against their oppressors, and they won. So in this sense, if you're a supporter of the ANC or you belong to a demographic represented, by the ANC, then of course you're going to see the ANC in a positive light, and this can be then viewed as a victory or a success for the ANC, the historical fight that it emerged from. So it achieved its goal that it set out, or most of the goals it set out to achieve in 1912, and it got most of its freedom charter written into the constitution, and it got political power in 1994 under Nelson Mandela. So for them, for the the constituents, it's a success. That's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.